Welcome back to RPG PhD. I'm Dr. Ben, and today we're exploring a powerful storytelling principle known as Chekhov's gun. Whether you're running a one-shot or an extended campaign, this idea is all about making sure every detail in your game matters. But how do you use it effectively at the table? Today we'll dive into techniques for planting important details, rewarding your players, and making your world feel like an interconnected web of meaningful choices. Let's break it down. Chekhov's gun is one of the most famous principles of storytelling, attributed to the Russian playwright Anton Chekhov. The idea is simple. If in the first act you have hung a pistol on the wall, then in the following one it should be fired. In other words, every element introduced in a story should have relevance later on. Nothing should be extraneous. While this concept originated in traditional storytelling, it has powerful implications for tabletop role-playing games, where narrative structure and player choice constantly intertwine. In a role-playing game, the principle of Chekhov's gun encourages game masters to create a world filled with meaningful details where players' choices and the objects they encounter have weight. Chekhov's gun isn't just about foreshadowing events, it's about crafting a world where every detail serves a purpose, creating an interconnected web of consequences that builds immersion and depth. The principle of Chekhov's gun originated in 19th century Russian theater and literature, where Chekhov advocated for narrative economy. He believed that stories should not be cluttered with unnecessary elements. Every detail must serve the plot or character development. If something is introduced, a gun on the wall, a mysterious letter, or an unfamiliar character, it should have a payoff. Otherwise, its inclusion feels arbitrary and breaks the narrative flow. In many ways, Chekhov's gun reflects a form of trust between the storyteller and the audience. The audience, or in the case of role-playing games, the players, trust that the details presented have significance and will eventually come into play. For a GM, this principle can be a valuable guide, not only for designing plotlines, but for reinforcing player engagement with the world. Creating a world of consequence. In tabletop role-playing games, player agency is one of the most crucial aspects of storytelling. Players need to feel that their choices matter and that the world around them is responsive. Chekhov's gun can act as a framework for GMs to ensure that the elements they introduce, whether they be objects, NPCs, or environmental details, have a purpose that ties into the story. This creates a sense of immersion as players feel they are interacting with a living world where every action has potential consequences. One technique to implement Chekhov's gun is through foreshadowing. For example, if the players enter a room filled with ancient relics, the GM might describe a seemingly innocuous sword mounted on the wall. Its blade tarnished, but its hilt gleaming with runes. At that moment, it may seem like mere set dressing, but as the game progresses, the players might learn that this sword is the key to defeating a powerful lich or unlocking an ancient seal. By placing the object early on and giving it significance later, the GM is using Chekhov's gun to reward attentive players and create a cohesive narrative. Another example might involve a seemingly minor NPC. Perhaps early in the campaign, the players rescue a child from a burning building. At the time, it's a small, heartfelt moment, but much later in the game, that child, now grown or a bit older, returns as a pivotal figure, offering the players critical information or aid when they need it most. The earlier event, which seemed isolated, becomes integral to the story's unfolding. Early planting and delayed payoff. One of the most satisfying uses of Chekhov's gun in role-playing games is planting an element early and letting it resurface much later in the campaign. This could be a mystical artifact the players stumbled upon but didn't fully understand, or a piece of information that seemed trivial at the time. When the element reappears, it surprises the players while also creating a sense of narrative cohesion. This delayed payoff makes the world feel interconnected as past actions ripple into the present. For example, a party might acquire a seemingly useless trinket, a silver amulet engraved with a forgotten family crest. Much later, during a critical moment in a royal court, the amulet is revealed to be the key to identifying the true heir to the throne. The player's earlier decision to examine the amulet suddenly becomes pivotal to the campaign's climax. Rewarding exploration. Chekhov's gun can also be a powerful tool for rewarding players who pay attention to details. If players know that the world around them is filled with meaningful clues and objects, they are more likely to engage deeply with the setting. For instance, a well-described painting on the wall might hide a critical secret, a map to a hidden treasure, or a clue to solving a riddle later in the game. Players who take the time to investigate those details feel rewarded when those elements resurface in important ways. Imagine a scenario where the players discover an old, dilapidated mansion. They explore a dusty library filled with tomes, and one of them notes a particular book bound in crimson leather. Months later, after investigating a series of murders, they realize that the murderer has been marking his victims with the same symbol that was embossed on the book's spine. The player's early exploration now ties into a central mystery, emphasizing how the world reacts to their choices. NPC development and recurrence. Another powerful application of Chekhov's gun is through recurring NPCs. Instead of creating disposable characters, GMs can introduce NPCs who may not seem important at first, but later return in critical roles. This not only ties the world together, but also gives the players a sense of investment in the characters they meet. For instance, early in a campaign, the players might hire a local guide to help them navigate through dangerous swamps. The guide is competent but unremarkable. However, several sessions later, when they reach a distant city, they discover that this same guide is now leading a rebellion against a tyrannical ruler, and the player's past relationship with them plays a crucial role in the story's direction. Meaningful artifacts. In role-playing games, items and artifacts are often the most tangible way to introduce Chekhov's gun. A weapon, piece of armor, or magical artifact given to the players should always carry narrative weight. If the players receive a powerful artifact early in the game, there should be a reason for it beyond just mechanical benefits. This artifact might be tied to an ancient prophecy, hold the key to defeating a future enemy, or come with hidden consequences that the players must eventually face. An example might involve the party finding an enchanted bow early in their adventures. It seems like a powerful weapon, but as they continue, they begin to hear stories of a cursed archer whose spirit is bound to the bow. Eventually, they realize that every time they use it, they come closer to unleashing this malevolent force upon the world. The item becomes more than just a tool, it's a narrative thread that binds together various story elements. At its core, the principle of Chekhov's gun is about creating a world where nothing is arbitrary. In role-playing games where players can explore every corner of the setting and interact with every detail, this principle becomes even more important. It encourages GMs to think about the long-term implications of the details they introduce and how those details can re-emerge to enrich the story. This doesn't mean that every single object or NPC must have an earth-shattering impact on the plot, but rather that everything has the potential to matter. When GMs think of their world as an interconnected system of cause and effect, it deepens the sense of immersion for players who come to trust that their actions and observations will have meaningful consequences. While Chekhov's gun is a powerful tool, GMs must be careful not to force outcomes too rigidly. The magic of role-playing games lies in player agency. Their choices and creativity should shape the narrative just as much as the GM's plans. Therefore, the details GMs plant should not feel like predetermined paths, but rather opportunities that players can choose to engage with. If the players miss an important clue or go in an unexpected direction, the GM can adapt, allowing the story to unfold in surprising and dynamic ways. Chekhov's gun, when applied thoughtfully in role-playing games, transforms the game world into a rich, interconnected narrative space. By ensuring that the elements players encounter, whether objects, NPCs, or information, have the potential to matter later in the story, GMs create a sense of continuity and immersion. The careful planting of details and the delayed payoff of their significance can lead to incredibly satisfying moments of realization and triumph for players, rewarding their attentiveness and engagement. When combined with player agency and narrative flexibility, Chekhov's gun becomes a vital tool in the GM's storytelling arsenal, helping to craft a world where everything is interconnected and nothing is wasted. And that wraps up our dive into Chekhov's gun and how you can transform your RPG campaigns. Remember, the key to using this technique is to make every detail count, from that strange artifact to the NPC your players meet in passing. When those elements resurface later, it not only surprises your players, but makes your world feel alive and interconnected. Got any stories of Chekhov's gun in your games? Share them in the comments section below. I'd love to hear how it worked out for you. And if you're new here, don't forget to hit that like and subscribe button for more deep RPG insights from RPG PhD. Thanks for watching. See you next time.